Who is saying this? Who is Sean Hannity saying this? Is Tucker Carlson saying this? Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Candace Owens, Andrew Klavan? Am I saying this? Is Charlie Kirk saying this? Is the Hodge twins saying this? Is Steven Crowder saying this? Who is saying this? Is Lauren Chen saying this? I'm flabbergasted at who the hell is saying this because I haven't seen it. Welcome to the Bald Brad Show. Our story is about AOC, the Democrat from New York, saying crazy stuff about critical race theory. You're going to really love this article. It is written by Emily Zanotti of the Daily Wire. If you're not already a member over there, please go over and become a subscriber today. She titles it, AOC Blasts Critical Race Theory Critics. Why don't Republicans want us to learn how not to be racist? What a crazy statement that is. And who the heck is talking about this? This is nuts, man. But hey, it's coming from AOC, the same person that came up with the Green New Deal, folks. So her saying crazy stuff is normal. But I want us to take note here because even though she says crazy stuff, she's a really good politician in crafting narratives and lying. And what you're going to see here is her taking this one sentence, this kind of narrative that why don't Republicans want us to learn how not to be racist? And she carries it from beginning all the way to end. So her forming narratives and lying to the American public, that she is really good at. Emily starts the article off saying, AOC, a Democrat from New York, lashed out at critics of teaching critical race theory, CRT, claiming that Republicans don't want children to learn how not to be racist. Yes, AOC, that's exactly it. That's exactly why Republicans don't want critical race theory taught to their children. There couldn't be any other multitude of reasons for parents not wanting this to be in our public school system. AOC also echoed a leftist talking point, claiming that CRT is taught only in a select number of law schools and that CRT would not be taught to public school children, which is part truth and part false. So yes, it is for a select number of law schools. It was primarily pushed for law schools to show and look at the disparities that neutral laws would create and see if those laws had anything to do with racism or if those laws should be changed and look into it further in depth. Now, this has transformed into being taught in the public school systems, the fact that America is systemically racist, that since the founding fathers established their government, established their creed of this great nation, that has extrapolated into white supremacy throughout America, and that our institutions have inherited that white supremacy and is ultimately suppressing people of color and minorities down in favor of people that are white. And it goes on beyond that. The founders said that our systems of government need to be torn down from the bottom up. It needs to be reestablished. It needs to be redefined and recreated so that everybody's on an equal level playing field. And folks, the only way to get that done is through an authoritarian government. You cannot do that through free will. There's always going to be disparities with race. There's always going to be disparities going down to the core of the individual. You can never have full-on equality. You can never have full-on utopian style societies, but that's what they're going to push for, and that's what they want here, these crazy Marxists. It goes on to say, AOC also echoed a leftist talking point claiming that CRT is taught only in a select number of law schools, but a claim that runs afoul of one made by the nation's second largest teaching union, the National Educators Association, which called CRT reasonable and appropriate. It is not reasonable and it is not appropriate. You are teaching the children that America is a racist country from the top down. Now, do we have elements of racism? Absolutely. Every culture out there does. Every nation out there does. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't teach history the way it's being taught. Hell, we spend an exorbitant amount of time teaching that America is racist or that America has had examples of racism in the past. For example, slavery. For example, Jim Crow laws. All those things. But they want to go beyond that. They want to go beyond the conscious and the unconscious stuff that is taught in CRT. What I mean by that is if you are a white person, whether you are conscious that you are white and have racism, or you are unconscious that you are white and have racism, regardless of the fact you are racist and inherit white privilege, and thus you are having white supremacy automatically, and you just being white are suppressing people just based on the amount of melanin that you produce or don't produce in your skin. It goes on here to say teachers, however, AOC contends, should be fluent in anti-racism in order to train children away from internalized biases that begin forming while they are infants. Now, remember, what's crazy to me is this contradicts the idea of CRT. She's saying that they are already forming biases at the time they are infants. The fact that they are already conscious of this very thing, they are showing that through their actions, which is why she'll go on later to expand upon it. Critical race theory is not taught in elementary school, she says. It is only being taught in law schools, frankly, in the level that it should be taught, the Congresswoman said in an interview with CNN Don Lemon. AOC agreed with Lemon that CRT narrative is being pushed by Republicans to win back white suburban voters by scaring them, according to a write-up on an interview at Fox News. Yes, that's exactly why Republicans are pushing this, is because they all want the vote. At no point have I ever heard a Republican saying, yes, let's push this narrative because it's going to result in scaring white people to go out to the voting booth and vote for Donald Trump or Republican out there. Yes, that's exactly what we're all talking about. That has been pushed by every single Republican I've ever heard of. What a bunch of crock-a-doo-doo this is. I almost cussed there, folks. I'm trying to do better with my language here, but it is. It's just stuff that she's coming out with. It's just so outlandish. You try to wrap your head around it. And again, she's talking on behalf of Republicans, basically saying this is what they're saying. Who is saying this? Who is Sean Hannity saying this? Is Tucker Carlson saying this? Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Candace Owens, Andrew Klavan? Am I saying this? Is Charlie Kirk saying this? Is the Hodge twins saying this? Is Steven Crowder saying this? Who is saying this? Is Lauren Chen saying this? I'm flabbergasted at who the hell is saying this because I haven't seen it. We know that Republicans have started now to use these laws curtailing critical race curriculum that's not even being taught in the first place as a proxy to saying we can't teach anything about race in our schools beyond just what some of the most minimal facts are without citing evidence. Well, the whole thing of her saying that's not taught in schools, it is taught in schools. You can actually see that almost quote unquote the handbook, the learning curriculum for it. So the stuff that's saying it's not being taught in schools is absolutely nuts. There's a reason why there's a pushback from parents because one, either they don't want it to be brought in their school or it's already being taught in some element in their school and they want it to stop. She then appeared to accuse Republicans of trying to foment racism in children. We should say, why don't you want our schools to teach anti-racism? Why don't Republicans want their kids to know the tradition of anti-racism in the United States, she railed. Why are they attacking the core roots of history in this country that strays anything beyond what we already know? Why don't Republicans want us to learn how not to be racist? Why don't Republicans want kids to know how not to be racist? What a change in narrative this is. And this isn't even what Republicans are talking about. We don't want anybody to be racist. Does she not remember that we are the party of anti-slavery? Does she not remember we're the party that established the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendment? Does she not remember that it was her party that was the one of slavery, right? The Democratic North and the Democratic South. You know, that's not what's taught in school systems. They talk about in terms of North and South. They don't talk in terms of Republican and Democrats. They don't talk in terms of the Democrats being the racists. They don't talk about any of that stuff. So she wants to talk about Republicans learning how not to be racist, even though in history, that's what should be taught was the Republicans were the party of anti-racism. We're the party that established freaking the civil rights movement. If you looked at the civil rights voting, folks, is that if the Democrats were solely in Congress, there would not be civil rights. You would not have this advancement of civil rights. It's all due to Republicans. Now, that's history for you, but that's not involved in CRT. Again, CRT teaches 1619 project style history, revisionist history that America is systemically racist and needs to be torn down from the bottom up, top bottom. AOC then launched into a tirade about children's implicit biases, which she claims are instilled by parents, possibly from birth. Here's something that we know neurocognitively. Babies already start to gravitate towards members of their own race when they're disproportionately exposed to just one race in their life, she said, adding that she does not believe that babies are racist. So I'm confused as to what's the big deal of somebody looking around in their social milieu and adopting those social milieu ideas of being comfortable with those that are around them, regardless of skin. So she kind of just throws this out here, but doesn't really elaborate on it too much. What it means that we already start to gravitate towards communities and people that we already know we're acclimated to. Okay. Like I don't get what that has anything to do with racism. Like you guys let me know if that's has anything to do with what she's talking about, because I don't see it. Teachers, AOC went on, should be armed with tools to disabuse children of racial animus that their Republican parents are ill-equipped or unwilling to address. Unbelievable statement there. As if she knows what's best for Republican children or just people's children in general is, I'm just going to read that again for you. Teachers, AOC went on, should be armed with tools to disabuse children of racial animus that their Republican parents are ill-equipped to address. What the hell? So this shows the authoritarian, the high level of what she thinks she's above everybody else, and she knows what's best for other people's children. Children do not feel guilt about racism when they learn early on what racism is. In fact, children learn to recognize it and can engage in corrective behavior early, she said. Republicans are using these words like critical race theory, which again is a law school curriculum that is not even taught in schools, which is a lie. And their argument is, well, some teachers may be exposed to it. Oh, wow. So your child's teacher is anti-racist and is actually fluent in how to dismantle racism and the dynamics of racism in a classroom. That is something that teachers should know how to do. And Republicans are trying to ban this and are trying to ban us from knowing our own history, she concluded, which is absolutely false. But you see her twisting that narrative. You see her taking that narrative from the top all the way to the bottom and completely hounding upon it. And at no point is anybody challenging her here. Don Lemon's not going to challenge her because they're biased, but they claim to be an unbiased news outlet like Brian Stelter, like Chris Cuomo, and Don Lemon here of CNN. And what's crazy is, one, she says it's not being taught in schools. It is being taught in schools. And what I love here is just the contradiction that she's saying teachers should teach how not to be racist. But the whole idea of critical race theory, at least one of the many ideas that's promulgated through them from their founders, is the fact that, again, if you're white, you're inherently racist and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't remove that racism. You can't change that racism because the whole idea of you being white is suppressing somebody else. Just the mere fact of you having white skin is stopping and inhibiting somebody else, a person of color, from rising up and establishing themselves within this country. So she doesn't ever talk about that. So she's contradicting herself from what critical race theory teaches and what critical race theory actually is. So this stuff is nuts what she's pushing. But again, it's no surprise. It's coming from AOC. But I want you to see the shift in narrative that's going on here with the Democratic Party on trying to establish critical race theory argument into our classrooms and how we need to be up to date on these transitions that they're pushing, because we need to be equipped with this type of argument here that she's trying to push, and because other Democrats are going to try to push this as well. And then you're going to see the school boards trying to push this upon your children and use the same narrative in their arguments here to parents. So that is what I have for you here. AOC blasts critical race theory critics. Why don't Republicans want us to learn how not to be racist? Crazy ass statement from AOC, but please make sure you like and subscribe to this video. Leave me a comment of what you think about all of this down there below, folks, and I'll see you later here on The Bald Brad Show.